My name's Veronica Culbertson, and I own Honey of the Hill Apiary.
Yay! I'm really glad to get you on the podcast. I know we spent some time together last week, which we'll get together or get into here in a minute.
Right.
But I wanted to get you on to kind of educate people, but also share your story. So,
Okay.
yeah. But before we get started with the bee stuff, why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself? Like, where are you from? You know, all
Okay.
that.
Well, I grew up right here in Mobile. I was actually born in New Hampshire, but all the family's here. My parents were up there while my dad was doing his graduate work. So I grew up here in the 80s, 90s, outdoors all the time. Pretty much just a wild, free childhood. Lots of cousins. My early childhood was just like I said, outside all the time, playing in the woods. And
When the lights come on, come inside. Right?
yeah, when you hear mom hollering,
Yeah.
you better get there. But don't be farther than you can hear, somebody yell. But otherwise, yeah, we were free to roam. And I like to think of my how I grew up as we were poor but privileged. So, like, I didn't know we were poor. Looking back, I know my parents were really struggling hard, and but we had they were solid. They were, we had stability. We had a lot of good family time. We went camping. We did. We were in scouts, and we had very helpful extended family. Grandparents sent us to summer camp and all that things. So we had all the privileges, that our friends have, but at the same time, everything was tight. And so, so we didn't do a lot of like fancy vacationing. Like I said, it was more like camping and stuff that kept me outside. So my dad's a scientist.
What's his background? Because there's obviously some correlation there between what you went into.
Absolutely. So my dad's very science and outdoors natured. He teaches at Spring Hill College. Big focus on biology. And when I was little, before he was teaching, he was in research at South, and so we would do things like he'd have us up there when he was dissecting rats or things like that. So we were always, hands in doing stuff. And so with him being sciencey, and my mom was super earthy and all that stuff. So we were just always in the thick of it, and lots of kids and lots of cousins and playing with things and testing things out. So so I've always been comfortable with insects. And then, later in life, what led to beekeeping, what we talked about, was some gardening failures. So we had, once I started having children with my husband, and they were little, we wanted to show them how things grew and all that. So we started doing some home gardening, and couldn't grow squash, couldn't grow watermelons. Things that needed real pollination.
Right.
Just it wouldn't happen in our little backyard garden. And we live in this city, which Mobile's a great city as far as green spaces. A lot of the there's a lot of nature around.
We're surrounded by trees and plants
trees
and
everywhere.
we live in a rainforest.
Right, exactly. And our city's management of it is such that it promotes those green spaces. So that's really good. I've got no complaints about that. But we do live in an area that's surrounded by neighborhoods and human life.
Right.
So we thought, well, we'll get honeybees and solve these pollination problems, because we were growing the plants and they would have the flowers and they were great, and then the fruits would just shrivel up. So we got honeybees, and then we very quickly learned that honeybees are not real interested in your backyard garden. They are they live in the big family group called a colony, and so there's like 60,000 in there at a time. And they need to collect food for all of them. So when they're looking for food, they're not looking at little plots of, your little backyard gardens. They're out in the woods looking for all the trees, or out at the park where they haven't mowed and there's clovers. And So that got me interested in, well, what do I do for my squash? Because honeybees didn't do it. So I learned that that's the job of your native pollinators. And those are everything from the other, 20,000 species of bees in the world that we have to wasps and beetles. Beetles are the biggest group of insect pollinators.
Yeah, you told me the other day, and I do want to pause for just one second
yeah.
and say, the other day you were kind enough to suggest that I come out and help you check the hives,
Right.
which I'll show some footage as part of this of what that was like, and I guess the pausing for just a second. At first, I feel like I should just thank you because I've never had an experience
fun,
like
isn't
that.
it?
Yeah, and I want to. It was really kind of nerve-wracking, beforehand because I was like, I'm not, I'm not super interested in like insects or anything like that. Bees have always had this kind of like healthy, respect for them and stuff. The idea of walking up to a hive was just insane to me, and so when we got there on site, I was just kind of looking over, and you said something about, they can sense fear, and I was like, well, I guess I better get rid of that. And so I had to change my mentality of like, hey, this is really cool, instead of, oh my God, what am I about to do? And the minute that I did that, it became a completely different experience, and it was just so amazing. It was really just such a cool experience to be able to stand there that close to these bees, and I didn't get stung once.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I get stung all the time.
I know that, but I didn't get stung once. I mean, it was just kind of like, it was just a really cool, thing. So, thank you for making that happen.
Yeah. I love to introduce people to the bees. And before I got into bees, like I've always liked insects, but I didn't seek it out. It wasn't, something I went out to do. But once I got into the bees, that just increased sort of that realm of my life. And so I am much more observant now of the other insects and things, and just how it all plays together, all the food web, all that, we all sort of need each other sort of situation. But yeah, once I figured out that the honeybees weren't my solution, by then we were, neck deep in bees, and I was in love with them, and that just sort of kept growing and growing and growing.
So I have to ask the question though, like, what did your neighbors think about you getting honey?
They love it.
Yeah,
they're great. I've convinced a few of them to forego their monthly spraying, in the yard and things. A lot of them leave more wild spaces now instead of just mowing the whole everything flat lawn. So it's good. I bribe them with honey. It works.
If it's any indication that what you gave me, it's a good bribe. I mean, like, it was absolutely delicious. So,
well, thanks. It's natural.
So, I'm going to guide us here a little bit because I think it's interesting, and you've talked about how you first got into it. I mean, there wasn't anything previous to this. It was just kind of like, hey, will you have some squash and watermelon that aren't growing? And besides just being outside?
No, I mean, we had been talking about it. My dad's getting older. It was sort of a, semi-retirement plan kind of idea, keep him active, that kind of thing. So we do the beekeeping together, and that's been phenomenal, just to share that experience as an adult with my father, So that's been a lot of fun. I'm sorry, I lost track with that.
Yeah, it was just totally. I was asking about if there wasn't any previous experience with beekeeping or any like.
Oh yeah, no. So we had talked about it and just
didn't know anybody that was a beekeeper. Just went. So how did you get started? Because you made it. You just glossed over that whole thing. Like, I just went out and got bees and it didn't work, and we're gonna move on. But it's like,
yeah, I did. Yeah, we.
Wait a second.
There's a big learning curve, and I suggest to anybody who's interested in it. Find somebody to shadow for a day.
Yeah.
Make sure it's something you're really into, because there's an investment. There's a lot of equipment. There's a lot of learning involved beforehand and during. I'm still learning all the time with things, and we've been doing it 10 years. But watch the YouTube videos, follow the people on Facebook, read the beginner books, any of the beginner textbook style books are going to have the basic information that you need to get started. And then, find somebody local because it really varies on location. The climate, there's different needs, so.
Somebody will be able to shortcut a lot of the issues that you might have.
Yeah, a lot of the things. We just fumbled into it. I mean, we went and took a beginner beekeeper course, which was like a 1-day, 4-hour thing. And it was great and we learned a lot, but it was sort of, it barely brushes the surface. But you really learn by doing. And so, if you can follow with somebody a little bit, or also my dad and I do the beekeeping together. It really helps to have a partner because we've got two brains in there. And if I say something stupid, he can go, oh, no, that's not right. What about this direction, So
I'm glad I could be so much help to you the other day. When, when we were doing this, I was not any help at all. Let's be clear.
You're a great help. But like you mentioned about the fear thing, when we first started keeping bees, I was always nervous. I was nervous that I was going to get stung, which is just part of it. I was nervous that I was going to mess up, which is also just part of it. Yeah. But it reflected in the bees when we would open a hive. They'd all come up to the top and go, you're anxious. We should be anxious too. What's going on? And when I open them now, I know, now more what I'm doing. I still might screw up. Yeah. But if I do, it'll be okay. We'll move on, So when I open them now, they just go on about their business because I'm not feeling threatened. And so I don't seem threatening. Right. And it's just like with other animals, dogs and sharks probably.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, you and I met at the Botanical Gardens.
Right.
But you have how many hives around town?
I have around 50 or 60 around the county on friends' properties. Yeah. Like I said, I'm kind of obsessed. I'm a crazy bee lady.
Collecting bees.
Yeah.
Now, there's been a lot of news over the course of the last, I would say even decade, right? On, bees and how much we depend on them. And, there were a lot of issues because we're just, spraying, insecticides freely, everywhere and killing everything. Right. And, how are we doing now? Because I'm hearing that it seems like it's somewhat changing, but,
good and bad. We're in a rough spot and the overall insect decline is enormous and it's now affecting other things like birds and small animals, and we're all part of that same food web. But we're also sort of in a good spot because information is so available and people are ready to learn and make changes, and there's a big interest in doing things naturally and, and looking to our environment for our health and things like that. So I feel like we're headed in a good direction in that there are a lot of teachers and a lot of teachable people, and, we just all have to make the right moves. Yeah. And work for the same goal, which is moving the right direction. Us all existing here together.
And how about locally? I mean, is it, because I know we have a lot of agriculture here, and I don't know how much that really matters as far as bees go, because they're not really depending, well, I guess they are. They're depending on the bees to pollinate.
Yeah, and we don't want to think about just the bees because the pollinators are such a broader spectrum than just bees. But bees are the canary, so to speak, in the coal mine. So they're an indicator of how things are going, and especially so because they're financially beneficial. Mm-hmm. So we monitor things that make us money. Yeah, for sure. Honeybees make money on both ends, to the beekeepers and to the farmers too. Right. So locally, I don't know. Like I said, I think we live in a spectacular environment here. The Delta and everything, it's great. And our city's really good about their management. But overall, like I live in the same place I grew up in. Yeah. And it's an older part of town. There haven't been new neighborhoods. There haven't been new stores. There's no real changes right there next to the botanical gardens. So there's a lot of green space. Just in my time that I've lived in that house, not my entire life, but 35 years or so, I've seen a huge decline in the insects there. I mean, I grew up there catching fireflies.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't see fireflies much in this area, and I'm from Northern Virginia and
Right.
used to seeing more than...
Right. So a lot of that is everybody bags up their leaves and sends them away, and that's where the fireflies have their babies and lay their eggs. And so if every few weeks or even every just season you're bagging all those leaves up and sending them away or burning them, you're getting rid of your pollinators and your fireflies. Another thing is soil health. Those firefly eggs hatch from those leaves and they go into the ground. The larvae spend their first 2 to 4 years, depending on the species.
2 to 4 years?
2 to 4 years.
Oh my gosh.
Depending on the species of firefly, before they emerge as an adult to do their few nights of blinking to find a mate.
Because they're not around for that long. I mean,
No,
it's like a week.
they are. They're just this little grub-looking
Yeah.
thing in the ground that you don't see. Soil health is really important. Of our 20,000 bee species in the world, you think of honeybees, they live in those big families. There are others that live in colonial type of situations. Bumblebees are one, but the vast majority of them are solitary and nest in the ground. So if you've got a sandy area and you see the little holes, if you sit and watch them, a lot of times a bee will come in and out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so tell us some, because you had some interesting facts the other day about bees. Like, why don't you just kind of educate us on some of the things that you like to use in your classes and stuff?
Okay.
You know?
All right. I do children's classes. I go to schools.
I'm a child.
And all that stuff. But I also do adult classes. Now, what I was going to get at is they're not very different.
Yeah, I was going to say,
They're
you
not
don't
very
have to
different.
change it for me.
The adult classes, I get into a lot more into the doom and gloom, pesticides, habitat loss. We're all going to die if we don't save the little bugs because they're feeding us, But the kids' classes are a lot of fun. My favorite bee fact is that bees have 5 eyes. I think I told you that one.
You told me that.
Yeah. They have their 2 big compound eyes that see sort of similar to how we see, but in a different color range. And then on the tops of their heads, they have 3 little simple eyes, and those are light sensors. And you remember what I told you about that?
Yep.
Yeah. So I always ask the kids, and a lot of times here lately, they've actually been getting it pretty good, but usually around 3rd grade, they start picking up on this. What are those light sensors for? And it's to detect predators.
Right.
So when a bee is out flying around, the sky above it's bright. And then as soon as a shadow comes over, then it casts knows there's a bird or something up there. Right.
Yeah.
And so I tell the kids this because this leads to, you can avoid being stung if a bee lands on you by simply not casting a shadow over it.
Yeah.
So if a bee lands on you, they don't want to sting you. They know they're going to die. So if it lands on you, if you can just be patient, she'll catch her breath and fly off. And if you can't be patient, come from the side.
Kind of.
Not
Move
not from above. And remember, like you said, to stay calm.
Yeah.
Because they can sense your,
Most people just run flailing in a different direction.
I run flailing in different directions from time to time. Yeah.
Well, you also mentioned, you asked me if I liked chocolate. And, you told me something interesting about the whole chocolate thing.
Different types of pollinators. One of those groups is flies. Flies are a really great pollinator group. They actually can function in colder temperatures than bees and butterflies and things. So for those northern plants, flies are real important. And in the fly family is mosquitoes. And a lot of people, mosquitoes are terrible. And they're bad for
They're
reasons.
not the greatest.
They're not great, but they are pollinators.
Yeah.
And of the roughly 140 different types of mosquitoes in the world, only about 30% of those actually drink blood. Of those, it's only the females in their reproductive phase when they're trying to have babies. Other than that, they're all pollinators all the time. And so then I go, well, do you like chocolate? Yeah. And everybody goes, yay, I like chocolate. And I go, well, the chocolate comes from a plant, and it's the cacao plant, and its primary pollinator is type of mosquitoes. So if we lose all the mosquitoes in the world, not only will we lose birds and bats and things that depend on them for food, but we'll also lose chocolate.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to lose chocolate.
No, nobody wants to lose chocolate.
No.
And it's there are certain bugs that you certainly would love to eradicate. We were talking about the black, grasshoppers, because there's just no good use for those.
Right, right.
But no, I mean it's it's hard for us to think when we're doing this because we're getting bit or whatever, stung. It's hard to think, wait a second, like this thing is gonna make an impact, or this class of thing is going to make an impact.
The class of things, swatting mosquitoes on your body.
Yeah, no,
that's not a problem. Yeah. When you go to wipe out, just this broad, I'm going to kill every bug in my environment, so I never have to experience a bug or a mosquito or a bee or anything on me ever. That's just kind of outrageous. Yeah. Live in a bubble. So, but yeah, my main point with my education is that we need diversity in our environment, diversity in every aspect of life. But especially so for our survival. If you want strawberries and bananas and chocolate, well, they all have different pollinators, and we need to defend them so that we can all continue to function.
So what are some things, what are some things that people can do? Like, I know that if you're trying to attract pollinators, planting certain plants and things like that, what are some things that they can do or even not do that would help this along?
Shrink your lawn. The grass lawn.
The actual grass portion of it?
Your actual grass lawn does nothing for the environment. It's a drain on resources.
It is literally the worst thing that we could possibly ever do, and I hate it.
It's
a waste of money. It's a waste of resources. A waste of time.
Just keep shrinking it until you have just this little patch, and But as much wild space as possible. A lot of the bees and things nest in stems. And it takes, maybe a year after. So if you've got a flower bed and the flowers all die over winter, and then so you've got all these stems and dead things sticking up, and we're really tempted to pull all that out. But if you just deadhead the flowers and leave the stems, then it still takes like a year for those, maybe not a full year, but depending on the density of the wood. But those stems have to die and become thin enough for the bees to burrow, and then they'll do their, lay their eggs in there in their life cycle. So, it's like another full year you're looking at. So as limited of, removing of that stuff as you can.
Yeah.
And then leaving some piles of leaves in some corners for your fireflies and
bugs and
things. Yeah. And then really protecting the soil. You want moist soil. You don't want to put chemicals on it. There's a lot of things that nest in the soil, and it's all, they seem like a nuisance when they're butting into your head, but they're not a nuisance when they're pollinating your food.
Right.
So, you just got to look at both sides of the picture, and we've got to have balance.
Yeah. We've kind of lucked out. We talked about this, when we got together. The property that we have is surrounded by woods, and we also have some ponds, some water in the area and stuff like that. And even though we're kind of in the middle of the city, we have this ecosystem that surrounds us. And I didn't mention this. When I came home from visiting with you the other day, I was laying on our bed looking out the window, and there was a tree, and I just kept seeing all these bees around this tree. We have a beehive in this tree, and I didn't even realize it. And so, but we're surrounded by all these great environments for these bugs to live in.
Right.
And we've got, all kinds of dragonflies and, bees and, bumblebees and unfortunately a lot of wasps too. That's the one thing that I'm just like, I don't care what you say, I'm getting rid of all the wasps.
Get rid of all the wasps.
Yeah, so.
Wasps are incredible. They serve a multitude of purposes. They're pollinators, they're predators, they're part of the cleanup crew.
I just don't want them on my back porch.
You don't want them on the porch.
Yeah.
But there are ways you can prevent things from nesting right on your house.
Yeah.
So, and if you have a lot of real natural environment around, then they prefer that, But you've heard of the people hanging like the paper bag puffed up, that works.
Does that work for wasps too?
It works for wasps.
Okay.
Yeah. it works. The flies is the plastic bag or something where
That's a plastic bag with water in it?
yeah.
So what were you saying?
No, so it's you take a paper bag, like a grocery bag,
okay.
puff it up, and you stick it up in the corner, tape it up in the corner of your porch,
Okay.
and they see it when they're coming to nest and go, there's already a big wasp nest there.
And so they don't want to
They go
bother
somewhere
with it.
else. So yeah, they might go to the other corner of the porch, but
Interesting.
yeah. So if you want to keep them right out of your space, same like with the carpenter bees. Nobody wants carpenter bees nesting in their house.
Right.
The problem with that is carpenter bees are headstrong, and once they're already in there having babies, they're not leaving unless you kill them. So, but you can take advantage of their life cycle. They have a limited life cycle, and in the winter, only the queen survives, and she hibernates elsewhere. And in the meantime, those previous nest sites are vacant, and you can go and fill them over winter. Early spring, you can spray something smelly when your first carpenter bees are first starting to look for nest sites. They have a really short period to find a nest site, and so if they come to your house February and March and it smells like oranges or almond or whatever super smelly thing you spray out there, they're going to go immediately find someplace else. So a little bit of prevention at the right time of year, and they're not a problem. But people just don't know. They, and we live in such a right now immediate society that we just want our problems, solved right now.
Right.
And
so what would you say to somebody, like if they're having a party or something like that and they wanted to make sure, like, oh, I don't want any, like I can put some bags up, and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but
I mean, that's like,
as far as mosquitoes go, put
as
some
far as
citronella,
mosquitoes, if you're gonna have a party, yeah, and you need to do like a one-time fogging or something, that's reasonable. But this constant,
like every couple of weeks,
every few weeks, every month, people getting sprayed here and here and here, then there's always poison in the environment. And a mosquito's life cycle is like roughly about a week. So in the time that they're poisoned, those ones that didn't die are able to recover 3 times before the mosquito person comes back and sprays again. And in that time, all of their predators take months to years to recover. So
good point. Yeah.
we used to spray before we got the bees, and that obviously ended that, because you don't spray poison in your yard if you have bees you're trying to keep alive.
No.
But so we quit spraying, and slowly saw the predatory insects come back in. And we do have mosquitoes. We live on a swamp. All of Mobile is a swamp.
Right.
But I see dragonflies, and I see birds, and I see wasps and things that, bats and things. So I really feel like if we sort of lean towards nature's favor of the balance, things work out better.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've heard as a suggestion is attracting those things that, eat,
absolutely.
those. So bringing in plants and things that are attractive to,
Bat
birds,
houses,
bats, and things like that.
A small pond with, as long as it's got fish or
in
frogs or something that will
Yeah.
eat the mosquito larvae. I have a greenhouse, and I keep just during the summer, I keep a 10-gallon aquarium in there with just some minnows from the pond, and the mosquitoes come there because it's a convenient place to lay their eggs, and the fish eat them. And so
I've even heard, I was researching this because I was trying to find some way to control the mosquitoes. And I've even read that there was a suggestion of filling a 5-gallon bucket with a little bit of water and putting one of those dunks in it.
Mosquito dunks.
And then there was, they suggested, I think they suggested putting some sort of like lid on it, but having a hole in it so that they could get in.
Right.
But other things can't necessarily. But that they would lay it in and kill.
They some sort of lid gives them. I use a screen over my aquarium, mainly so the raccoons don't eat stuff. I've got stuff weighting it down. But it's really a metal grate. It's not a screen, so the mosquitoes can go in it because they crawl, like squeeze their body down into it. But when they're flying back up, they just bump against the top. So they get trapped.
Oh, cool.
Some of them, I'm sure, get out, but
It cuts the population a little bit. So
yeah, I mean something. At least the eggs they're laying aren't going to develop into anything.
Yeah. Well, what are some resources if somebody's interested in getting started in beekeeping? What are some resources that you'd point them to? Organizations or places where you can get
Yeah,
supplies locally, even too, if there's somebody.
right. They're definitely the extension office. The out on Schillinger Road has offers a class a couple of times a year. They've got a lot of really good resources. There are some local beekeeping clubs, like on Facebook. There's one for Mobile County. There's one for Baldwin County. That's a really good way to get started. Is just to start reading and seeing what other people are doing. The beekeeping changes throughout the year, so there's a lot of paying attention to the climate and the seasons and what's happening next. So just learning those cycles.
Yeah, paying attention to the weather
Yeah.
cycles that are coming
Right,
through and
yeah.
stuff. And now am I correct in you sell the honey and stuff like that?
I do some, yeah.
Okay. And you want to plug that, or do you want
I mean,
to? It's not really that important to you. This is something that, because I know, folks, this is just a passion project for her. She's not,
yeah,
you know.
I'm obsessed. I do get honey. I do pull a lot of honey,
Yeah.
and people do call me to get it. So
Sure.
yeah, hit me up on Facebook.
Yeah.
Is the best way.
Okay.
Honey Hill on Facebook, or Honey of the Hill Apiaries is on Facebook also.
Okay.
Send me a message, and I'll see if I can help you get some honey or tell you something about bees that you didn't know.
Yeah.
They flap their wings 11,400 beats per minute.
Yeah, and I was trying to remember all the different facts that you told me about. The queen bees mate once and fertilize the egg when they're actually putting it into the cell.
Yeah, and this is really cool. Another one of my favorite bee facts. So a queen bee, after she emerges as a young adult bee, she spends about a week maturing, and then she leaves the hive for one of only 2 times she'll leave the hive, which is her mating flight. And so she'll go out mid-afternoon on a nice sunny day like today and meet up with 15 or 20 local boys, and
There's a joke in there, but it's a
there's a
family
joke in
show,
there.
and
We're
I'm
not
going to
gonna
leave
say
it alone.
So then they expire, the drones expire upon mating, and she flies home with their genetic material to lay eggs the rest of her life. But how her body is set up, her reproductive organs, she has where her eggs are stored, and she has where she stores the genetic material, the sperm. And as she releases an egg, she can choose whether or not to fertilize it at that point. But the coolest part of that is that she doesn't make that decision. The workers make that decision for her.
Interesting.
She actually is essentially just the reproductive organ for the colony, which is considered a superorganism.
Okay.
So when they want boy eggs to be laid, which are the unfertilized eggs,
Right.
they direct her to a certain area where they have cells built the size for boy babies, and then she feels it out and sees what size it is and lays the appropriate egg. And if they want female eggs, which is most of the workers, mostly what they need, that's all the workers, excuse me, so that's most of what they need is the female eggs, then they send her there and she lays the appropriate eggs. So.
And that you also said that they can make, is that the wrong word, a new queen if the queen dies or something happens to her?
Right, yeah, they'll make a new queen for a variety of reasons. If she fails at laying, if she, even if she's freshly mated, if she comes back, if she didn't get appropriate genetic material and she starts making bad babies or doesn't lay enough eggs, they'll go ahead and offer and replace her. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned that there was something, is it the royal jelly that, okay. And talk to me about that, because there's a number of people, actually not a number of people, but there's a lot of people that use that as a supplement.
Yes.
And I've always been curious about it because I was like, what the heck is this royal jelly stuff?
Fantastic. Yeah. It's a super nutrient rich bee superfood, essentially. The young workers, the nurse bees, have particular glands that they excrete it from.
Yeah.
And they'll crawl down into the cells with the eggs and put it in there to feed them. It's what the youngest babies and the queen eats.
Okay.
And like I said, it's super nutrient rich. People eat it. It's good for wound healing.
Well, the funny thing is, I was talking to my dad, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but he's taking he said the stuff that they use to seal
Propolis.
That was what it
Yeah.
was. That he's been taking that for quite some time. I don't remember what it's for, but
Everything inside the beehive is edible.
it's wild, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
People eat the larva.
Yes, you know.
See, there's actually been, I'm trying to convince some people to do it for me. There's been, scientific studies about the nutrient content and the different things in the beehive. And you would think the royal jelly is the most nutrient dense.
But
It's not. It's the drone larva at like the day they get capped or something. The drones and the queen larva are the most full
Have
of
you
all
eaten one
these
before?
amino acids. Maybe accidentally, probably not. I've eaten a good bit of royal jelly.
I was gonna say.
It's
Yeah.
got sort of a sour, fungusy kind of taste. It's
Interesting.
interesting, yeah.
That's wild because you would think it would be sweet like the
It's
honey.
got sweetness to it too,
Yeah.
but it's sort
That's
of.
wild.
But you put it on a wound like a burn or something, and people do honey too. But you put royal jelly on it, put a Band-Aid on it. The next day, it's like half gone.
Wow.
That stuff's really good.
Well, and just in case somebody hasn't, heard this, like if you have allergies, bee honey, local bee honey is the best thing that you can do for it because it'll actually introduce those, what are the
Pollen.
Yeah, well, the
It's- yeah.
antagonizing, mechanism into your body in a safe way.
Right, right.
And, so it allows it. But you also mentioned something about the anti-inflammatory capabilities of the stings,
The
too.
stings, yeah. So a lot of people have heard that bee stings help with arthritis and things like that. And if you read any Chinese medicine, anything about beekeeping around the rest of the outside of the Western world, bee venom therapy is big business. The main way that I describe it is that the bee sting triggers your immune system to fight inflammation, but it's not specific just to the sting. It's throughout your entire body. So if you're being stung weekly or even monthly, then your body's immune system is constantly being triggered to fight inflammation. So if you have problems like arthritis or it's used for Lyme disease and things associated with that. A lot of different reasons people do it for.
Well, I mean, there's more and more that's coming out now, and I'm a biohacker, I'm a freak like that, and there's more and more coming out now about inflammation being the true cause of a lot of our issues, whether it's heart disease or Alzheimer's or
cancer,
whatever, cancer for sure. And so, it's just interesting to me that we're now finding these natural ways that we can fight that inflammation, and a lot of it, of course, just stems from our environment and our foods that we eat and stuff like that.
Well, you may think also, a couple of hundred years ago when we lived much more outdoors life, we would be stung
get
more
stung,
often. Yeah. So you'd be climbing around and you'd step on something or whatever. So it may be that we're missing out on something that we always had up until industrialization.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and then there are other aspects of not the bee venom itself, but beekeeping, being around the bees. They do, once you get over the fear factor, they do have a calming effect. And we talked about they hum in the key of C.
You mentioned that. Now, I don't know if I was cognizant enough to be able to figure out what key of C was and whether they were humming at that. But I mean, it was really cool
This is
because
what I've read. I don't know.
they were just chill. I mean, they just kind of chilled out.
Yeah.
And the humming. The one thing that got me and just made my day, well, besides seeing a queen, was the butt wiggle. Because you see videos of it online, but it's just so funny to see them on the hive, wiggling their butt, and it's the way that they,
they're telling
one of the ways they
something.
communicate.
They're talking.
Hey, there's a human looking at us. Be cool.
Right.
So
act normal.
act normal. But no, it's interesting to me that there are so many different facets to bees that we don't really even think about. It's one of the reasons why. Well, the main reason is I just wanted an excuse to be able to go and see your hives.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on is to talk about how incredible they are as kind of I mean, they aren't just an insect. It's like you said, a living organism. And how helpful they are to us, how important they are to us.
Right.
And especially nowadays with so many people spraying things everywhere. just kind of like, hey, let's counteract that just a little bit and
Just tone it down. Be
give-
more aware of the
yeah.
bigger picture. It's
yeah.
not just your yard, I mean, when we're talking about, like, honeybees can travel miles, but most of your little pollinators in your yard, they never leave your yard. A lot of them don't travel more than 200 feet or so, and that's to find forage and also to find mates. And so if you are cutting down all the food and all the nesting sites, then not only, are they starving, but they're lacking the genetic diversity needed to keep those populations.
Yeah.
So it just, we're not all independent little columns or pedestals or whatever.
We're all connected.
We're all connected.
For sure.
So,
Now, well, anything that you'd like to add about, beekeeping or anything?
Fun.
No, I just, I appreciate you coming out and talking to us about this. I was just kind of looking through the questions and seeing if there was anything else that, I wanted to talk to you about. But, no. Do you want? You said Facebook. If they want to find you on Facebook.
Yeah, I'm Honey Hill on Facebook.
Okay.
And it's like a person profile. It's not like a page. Yeah. And then I have my Honey of the Hill apiaries page that can be followed. I have a website, honeyofthehill.com.
Okay.
It's pretty stable. I have received some emails through it.
Yeah. And so you speak in front of classes for kids and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. If somebody wanted to get in touch with you for kind of like an educational moment or something along those lines, that would be appropriate as well. I'm just trying to think
definitely.
of like how people
might.
Through
email, honeyofthehill@yahoo.com.
Okay.
Forgot my email for a minute. And then the bees are fun. The little bit of honey that gets sold pretty much goes into more equipment so that I can collect more bees. But my community outreach is really beginning to develop, and I think that's really probably my bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Because I feel like I told you, when I learned about this squash bee, I was like, well, if I spent my life outside with bugs growing up, playing with insects, and I really enjoy this thing, and I'm educated, and I have all the availability of all the information in the world. If I didn't know this, then surely people who aren't interested in this at all don't know any of it, So I don't know. I have a real drive to just inform my community of what we need to do.
Yeah, like I told you the other day, I consider myself an educated individual. I know about bees. Mm-hmm. I'm a biohacker kind of minded guy, but there were at least a dozen times where things came out of your mouth, and I was just like, what?
Yeah.
I'm
that's exactly how I felt when I learned them, and I want to share that. When I go do kids classes, they look at me like I'm a lion tamer. It's great.
Well, they are bees. They are scary.
Yeah. the adults look at me like I'm nuts, and the kids are like, wow.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed how things have developed. I just wanted to grow squash, and
here you are on a podcast talking
and here
about
I
bees.
am, right? And I get to go to all these great places. My dad and I do the adult classes together. We also do beekeeping instruction and very beekeeping related classes. Like we did a history of beekeeping class that was really fascinating. Our relationship with bees goes back before we could read and write, and we were scrubbing on cave walls and things. Yeah. So, and there's documentation of it. There's tools. There's things. They found recently not a couple of years ago, the oldest honey in existence, 5,000 years old, in a tomb of a noblewoman in Georgia.
Wow.
The country of Georgia.
No, I figured it was
not next door.
Yeah. No, it was interesting because, I may have mentioned this to you when we got together, that there's a YouTube channel, and if you're watching this and you haven't looked at this YouTube channel, when you finish this, go find it. But there's a group of guys, they have a channel called Yes Theory. Mm-hmm. And the whole premise is like stepping into stepping into experiences that we wouldn't necessarily have, before.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
just say yes.
figured that this is one of those, for me, this was one of those experiences. And it's interesting because I think you stepped into one of those experiences years ago, and it's turned into something very, very different for you.
Well, I'm in one right now.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah.
So.
For sure. So.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to thank you for coming on the podcast. Anything, just to close up, any final thoughts or comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, if you're interested in trying out beekeeping or something like that, give it a shot, because you don't know where it's going to go. I didn't know I would be able to go to schools and tell kids about bees. I didn't know I'd be here. I didn't know how it would ingrain me in my community.
Yeah.
So I really feel, connected with people. I have people that trade me eggs for honey, and
that's big money right there.
Yeah,
you might not want to say that. We'll cut that out so the IRS doesn't come looking for you.
But yeah, no, don't send us to the IRS. No, but yeah, people, I get people's canned things that they've made. Their spaghetti sauce, their stuff, and I love it because I don't have to do all that stuff. But I get to benefit from it, and I get to make these connections, and so there's
something very distinctly different about local honey. So I think it's cool too that you're sharing that with the community as well, because as we discussed, outside, the flavors are just so different.
Yeah, and a lot of good things about local honey. Honey in general, you should get from your local. It's like a farmer,
Right.
So. The honey you get at the stores, especially the big box stores, the labeling laws
it's just sweetener.
It's sweeter.
It's just sweetener. No, I'm just saying it's just a sweetener.
Syrup.
It's not going to have any.
It can be up to like 30% high fructose corn syrup, and it doesn't have to be on the label. But beyond that, they can feed those bees sugar water and call it honey because the bees have processed
Converted it to honey. Yeah.
You can put the word local, and it can be from Argentina, because local is a relative term.
Oh, wow.
Local to earth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the stuff you get at the store is questionable. Go to a farmer's market. Look on Facebook. There's a lot of beekeepers on Marketplace as soon as the honey season hits, trying to sell honey.
Honey season?
Honey season, yeah.
Are we in the midst of that right now?
We're right about to hit honey season. I showed you the ones where they were filling it.
Yeah.
And as soon as they get it all capped off, covered with wax. So yeah, the next couple of weeks, the beekeepers will be starting to put out the honey. And that'll last through goldenrod bloom, which is September, October, probably. As long as the weather's good, Yeah, so...
Well, Veronica, I really appreciate you coming on. And, if anybody needs to get a hold of her for, speaking engagements or just to maybe ask a question or two, please don't, waste her time. But I do really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with me and through me, our audience. And if there's anything we can do for you, just let us know. But
okay, take care of the bugs.
Yeah. Definitely. So,
all right.
That's it.
Thanks. Okay, cool.
This is...